See you in court is what Texas Governor Greg Abbott told the Biden administration over the weekend after the DOJ told the governor that he needs to remove the floating border wall and razor wire that we reported on last week from the border, or else he will face a lawsuit. The governor, with that reply, essentially saying, nope, we're not removing anything. We've got a lot to go through with all of this, and I want to note that the governor of Texas has been making a lot of news lately, first on the implementation of this sort of backwards plan, in my opinion. There's a lot of issues with it. I went through some of them in the last video we did about this, which will be linked below. But he also made news recently for signing a bill that actually rolled back the ability for local governments, city governments, to do things such as enforce a water break every 4 hours for construction workers in a state where it is regularly above 100 degrees. So just another headline here for the governor. Let's get into the specifics here with this article from Politico. Headline, See You in Court, Abbott responds to DOJ border lawsuit warning. The Department of Justice plans to sue Texas for deploying a floating barricade at the southern border, according to a letter to Governor Greg Abbott obtained by Politico. Abbott's response, I'll see you in court, Mr. President. In its Thursday letter, the DOJ cited, quote, unlawful construction of a floating barrier in the Rio Grande River, and asserted that the barrier might impede the federal government's official duties. The letter did not address any migrant-related concerns at the Texas-Mexico border, but DOJ spokesperson Hinjosa said Friday that, quote, the department is aware of the troubling reports, and we are working with DHS and other relevant agencies to assess the situation. Later Friday, White House Assistant Press Secretary Abdullah Hassan assured reporters that President Joe Biden's border policies are, quote, working, and that illegal immigration is down to the lowest levels in over 2 years. Governor Abbott's dangerous and unlawful actions are undermining our effective border enforcement plan and making it hard for CBP, that's Customs and Border Patrol, to do their jobs of securing the border, Hassan said. The governor's actions are cruel and putting both migrants and border agents in danger. The Department of Justice made clear that it is prepared to take the governor to court if he doesn't immediately remove the unlawful structures in the Rio Grande. A group of 87 congressional Democrats also penned a letter to the president on Friday asking him to intervene in Texas border practices. Led by Representative Joaquin Castro of Texas, the lawmakers expressed profound concern about Abbott's border policies, known as Operation Lone Star. The letter asked if the federal government to immediately intervene, citing reports of barbaric practices making the border areas, quote, death traps for migrants, and arguing that the border policies interfere in the federal enforcement of immigration laws and violate U.S.-Mexico border treaties. I'll remind folks as well that this comes with some absolutely tragic reports in some cases of pregnant women trying to get through this razor wire, in some cases ending up bloodied and dealing with complications, children needing to go through them. If folks have traveled hundreds or thousands of miles in many cases to risk everything to get to the United States, to get out of whatever situation they're in, one last little barrier is not going to prevent them from turning around at this point in time. We don't need to essentially create, as they mentioned in there, like a death trap to be the last stage. We also saw this just horrific image over the weekend of a baby being passed through the wire along the border. That's hard to look at. That's hard to believe that that's how we are dealing with this situation at the border. Surely there is a better way to do it. I'll talk about some of my thoughts after we get through a little bit more here. I want to pull up this article from the AP that just adds a little bit more color to the issues, the human issues that are now happening as a result of this. Texas is using disaster declarations to install buoys and razor wire on the U.S.-Mexico border. Not sure that that's even a valid reason to do it here, but maybe we'll find out in this court battle. Eagle Pass, Texas, wrecking ball-sized buoys on the Rio Grande, razor wire strung across private property without permission, bulldozers changing the very terrain of America's southern border. For more than 2 years, Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott has escalated measures to keep migrants from entering the U.S., pushing legal boundaries with a go-at-it-alone bravado along the state's 1,200-mile border with Mexico. Now, blowback over the tactics is widening, including from within Texas. A state trooper's account of officers denying migrants water in 100-degree Fahrenheit temperatures and razor wire leaving asylum seekers bloodied has prompted renewed criticism. The Mexican government, residents, and the Biden administration are pushing back, with the U.S. Justice Department threatening to sue Texas unless steps are taken Monday to begin removing the floating barrier. I'm not going to read all this. I'm going to skip down a little bit here to another part that I found notable. Trespassing to stop trespassers. For one property owner, the DPS mission cut him out of his land in 2021 as Eagle Pass became the preferred route for migrants crossing into the U.S. Magali and Hugo Urbina bought a pecan orchard by the river that they called Heavenly Farms. Hugo Urbina worked with DPS when the agency built a fence on his property and arrested migrants for trespassing. But the relationship turned acrimonious a year later after DPS asked to put up concertina wire on, that's like the razor wire that we're seeing, on riverfront property that the Urbinas were leasing to the U.S. Border Patrol to process migrants. Hugo Urbina wanted DPS to sign a lease, releasing him from any liability if the wire caused injuries. DPS declined, but still installed the concertina wire, moved vehicles onto the property, and shut the Urbina's gates. That cut off Border Patrol's access to the river, though it still leases land from Urbina. They'll do whatever they want, Urbina said this month. The farmer, a Republican, calls it poison politics. Critics call it deja vu. Again, you would think in the state of Texas, Texas that generally wants to protect things like property rights and that sort of thing, essentially taking control of people's lands without even going through an eminent domain process here is another side of this. When you have the literal landowners who are in this area also complaining about the way this is being handled, folks who would generally be on the side of Governor Greg Abbott, obviously we need to be looking at the situation. And I'll take a step back here and try to look at this from a larger point of view. I understand wanting to know who is entering the country and having them come in a way where we can process everybody in a humane but orderly fashion as well, right? I don't think that people should be able to easily get across the border, crossing a river wherever they want to willy-nilly. I'm not saying that that's the situation now. Clearly, it's not easy in a lot of places to do this, and it shouldn't be easy. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that where are the talks of a real solution that, number one, does secure the border in a reasonable way so that we don't have people just crossing in random places, but number two, also creates a process for folks who do want to claim asylum or who do want to move to the United States and become a citizen, create a process for them to be able to do so in a reasonable amount of time, and having them, put in a reasonable amount of effort once they're here. I haven't heard any of these lawmakers talking about this. I haven't heard the Biden administration talking about this. The Biden administration is suing Texas Governor Greg Abbott over this. I think that should be happening because clearly we're seeing disputes between state agencies in Texas and Border Patrol. They're both making each other's jobs more difficult. We're seeing disputes between the state agencies, DPS, as part of Operation Lone Star, and landowners along the border. That's an issue. So I'm glad that the Biden administration is doing something about this. But in addition to a lawsuit, let's start talking about rolling out some sort of plan to fundamentally improve this situation. I'm going to list off a couple of things that I think folks, in many cases, maybe on both sides of the aisle, would actually agree on that can make this situation better for everybody and also remove this humanitarian disaster that's been going on for years. I mean, over the winter, we were reporting on migrants essentially freezing at the border and being forced to cross a river with water and then spend the night on shore while it's 20 degrees outside. That's a disaster. I'm sure we lost several folks to hypothermia and other issues during all of that. If not, just caused issues in general. Now we've got the middle of summer heat. It's over 100 degrees every single day along most of this border, and we are not giving people water. We're making people pass babies through razor wire. That's not a real solution, and that's a humanitarian disaster. Where are the conversations about adding more immigration courts so that we can process individuals faster? Right now, if you're going through an asylum process, you're eventually, if you're deemed to be able to do it, you're gotten into the country, and it's upwards of a year or more to have your claim processed in court. That seems ridiculous. Where are the conversations about adding, several times more the amount of immigration courts than we have today? Where are the conversations about making our ports of entry a better solution for folks rather than them crossing through these rivers? If everyone's going to get turned around there, then, and then we're sending them to these other places, why don't we look at having them funneled in through an actual port of entry? Let them cross a bridge and be processed on the other side. And I'm open to solutions where, and this isn't ideal, I know this isn't ideal, but I'm into solutions where you have a place for people to stay while their immigration court stuff is being processed. It needs to be done in the correct way. Obviously, we've seen the Obama administration and the Trump administration and others do this in an incorrect way with the whole kids in cages situation, unfortunately. But we can be looking into ways if we increase the speed of the immigration courts, having a place for these folks to stay while their court cases are being handled and deemed whether or not they can claim asylum or not. Where are the potential plans to allow folks to apply for asylum in the country where they're at a U.S. embassy or something along those lines? Where are the solutions for, this is going to maybe be unpopular among some of you, to actually secure some of the border. In some cases, a wall might actually make sense, but in a lot of cases, it doesn't. Let's talk about using drones or using other things to prevent the actual bad guys, the cartels and whoever, from, bringing drugs and whatnot across. I mean, that is something that does happen that we don't want to happen. So if we get it to a point where we can deal with the people coming across who want to come across in a humane way, create a clear way for, okay, these are the exact rules, these are the paths to citizenship that are clear, concise, something, because right now it's not clear or concise at all. It's a jumbled mess. If we create that pathway so that regular people who are looking to come to the United States have an avenue to do so that's not deadly, then we can treat the rest of the border in a way where it's like, okay, now this is where we deal with, the smuggling of drugs and that sort of stuff in a different way. I'm not an expert in any of this, right? These are just some proposed solutions. I would wish that some of our legislators, who are the ones who are supposed to be going through these solutions and diving into all of the specifics, would be doing so. But I don't know. Ask yourself, when was the last time you heard somebody talking about real solutions at the border beyond just trying to build a barrier that clearly does not work on its own? A barrier is one piece of the puzzle. You need a whole lot more than just that. Personally, I just want to see an end to the human suffering element of all of this, because it's terrible to see some of the images that we've been seeing, particularly here in the state of Texas. Thank you all so much for watching. I know I went on quite a bit at the end there, but it's frustrating to see the lack of response. I'm curious what some of your ideas might be on how to solve this, because I don't have a perfect solution. There might not be one, but let's at least have our lawmakers actually going out and discussing it. Thank you all so much for watching. If you're not subscribed to us, please press the subscribe button down below. You can also follow me on Twitter at LewisD217. Thank you all very much. Have a good day.